massive response by email, texts and phone calls to the closing of Cork Airport for a 10-week period. Let me talk to Kevin Cullinane. He's the marketing manager there. Kevin, good morning.
Good morning, Neil.
Even at this late stage, is this still written in stone? Is it reversible? Is it possible to postpone? Anything like that?
Well, we've been working on this for several months now. What we're trying to do is get this done in as sharp and as short a window as possible. Every airport has to either overlay or reconstruct its runway every 10 to 15 years. Our runway is now at its end of its natural life. Part of it is over 30 years old. So what we've been progressing over the last number of months is essentially what normally would be a 3-year programme of works into a condensed 12-month period. To get the funding in place prior to last Christmas, and then do all the design work since, so that we're ready to be shovel-ready for a very intensive 10-week period to essentially demolish the existing runway, recycle it, and rebuild it in 10 weeks. Given that this year, when you think back in the lofty days of 2019, we were doing 2.6 million passengers. This year, we're lucky if we'll have 200,000 passengers. So in that 10-week period, we might be discommoding 20,000 passengers, which we regret. But if we wait till next year, when we hopefully will have 1.5 million passengers, it's going to be considerably more inconvenience. And the airlines that we've spoken to, all of our airline customers agree that, look, the most prudent way of doing this is do it fast, do it quick, get it ready, and then you have an asset sitting there for the next 20 years to serve Cork and the broader region.
Just on the work that you're actually doing, you're resurfacing it. You're not extending it, though, no?
We're not even resurfacing. We're actually rebuilding the runway.
Pardon me for the use of language, but you're not extending it.
We're not extending it. I mean, there's no need to extend it. I mean, that would prolong the project even further. But we don't need to, because modern aircraft technology is like if you buy a new car today. It's fuel efficiency. A new car will go further on less fuel than it did 15 or 20 years ago. The same with aircraft. And Norwegian proved that. An aircraft, the same aircraft that's flying Ryanair passengers to the Canaries, was able to operate from Cork to the west coast of the United States.
Gotcha.
So technology is moving in our favour in that respect. You don't need as long a runway to get to destinations like these.
So you're saying that come September anyway, that flight numbers would have been tiny. When I would have thought there would have been the mother of all sales on seats, and that Cork Airport would have been booming in September.
See, the challenge is we've gone from a situation before the pandemic where we had 52 routes and 9 airlines operating to where we now have just 2 routes with 2 airlines. Like you mentioned on air yesterday, we have just 3 flights a week. Not a day, 3 flights a week to London Heathrow. That's why people who don't have the same amount of knowledge about this as your good self, that's why people are saying now is the time to do it. And we've, I say, all the heavy lifting on this in terms of the design and getting the funding in place. I mean, bear in mind, there's been minimal passengers coming through the airport. So there's been nothing coming into the till of the airport as such since March of last year. So we were progressing a lot of capital projects last year on the funds we had available. Things like our new baggage security system. When people come back into the airport in the coming weeks and months, they won't see that investment. They won't see the value of 12 million that's gone in to stripping out all of the old baggage security system, which was old X-ray technology, into new MRI technology. Well, all of that's been done. A lot of overhaul and
how was that? How are you able to do all of that though, and not do the runway? Well,
the part of the runway is that it's a major capital investment project. You're talking about 2.1 kilometres of roadway, of runway that needs expert planning, where we have to replace all of the ancillary electrical works as well, all of the navigational lights on that runway. So, you have to get the funding in place, which only came through in November. You have to go through a very rigorous, robust EU-wide procurement procedure.
How long does that usually take?
Well, that started in November. Tenders will close this month, and we'll appoint the contractor next month, and then they'll be shovel-ready to start works the middle of September, have it done in a 10-week period, and be reopened by the end of November for what we all hope will be a bumper Christmas period.
But that's a 5-month gap between awarding the tender and shovels on the ground.
But what we want to do is stay open for what would hopefully be whatever business we have this summer, to keep peak periods of June, July and August, which are traditionally the busiest months of the year, airlines are looking to put in, again, subject to government restrictions being lifted, because bear in mind, at the moment, the advice is still you should only be travelling for essential reasons. And people are also saying...
But the ITAA said that Pat Dawson just said that where you're at now, you're going to be that way right across the summer, 99% down, one flight operating 3 days a week, because they don't see any kind of change until September.
But the airlines aren't seeing any change in government policy. So airlines aren't putting on additional flights right now because they can see there isn't demand. We've all been told this year, we'll be having staycations. We won't be travelling internationally this year for foreign holidays. So the market is completely depressed right now, will be till the end of the year. I say, we've gone from 2.6 million down to, less than 200,000 passengers this year. No option has zero impact on this. We've looked at the minimum we can do to disrupt air travel. But the best option, having looked at them all, is to do this quickly over a 10-week period. Then if we wait till next year, it would have to be done over 9 months. And you're looking at nighttime works, which are more expensive, more costly.
I understand. But you're suggesting that people, certainly in Cork, come September, won't have an appetite to fly overseas.
But there would be some appetite, but it would be minimal compared to hopefully next year when 80 or 90% of us are all vaccinated, and hopefully Europe reopens for at best or at worst internal travel between EU countries, and at best that's to open up to more international travel. But that's next year. None of us see anything really happening until the autumn of this year. So with construction also suspended during the pandemic, we have to bear in mind, engineers are having difficulty getting into the country right now because of the mandatory quarantine.
So even if you'd wanted them to get in a lot sooner, they couldn't have done?
We couldn't have. I mean, construction has been suspended unless it's absolutely of an essential purpose. So we've only seen, construction reopened in the last couple of weeks. So, this pandemic has thrown up huge challenges, but we've been progressing at pace to get as much of the capital investment done and to get this project, as I say, done as quickly and as cheaply and as safely as possible so that Cork has a runway that's going to stand us for the next 20 years.
And you're saying, and I've learned this morning, you're saying that we never will need an extension to the runway because technology has moved on and planes can land there regardless of how long the flight is or how much fuel they need to take on board. It's sufficient for all of that going forward.
Given the nature of the route network that you're going to have out of Cork, which is going to be as predominantly, a continental European and transatlantic airport, getting people, our ambition obviously is to build back the network bigger and better than it was coming into the pandemic. We still retain our ambitions to be Ireland's newest transatlantic airport. We've proven there is demand there. We've proven it can be done with Norwegian. And we're working hard, obviously, to attract other carriers back onto that transatlantic corridor in the future. But for the majority of the routes that will be served out of Cork, they're going to be continental European, maybe a transatlantic service and services to and from the UK. And the runway length at Cork is sufficient for that at present.
Do Norwegian fly international to America out of Cork?
They're not flying at the moment. I mean, Norwegian have gone through their own challenges as an airline.
No, it's just that you said we proved it with Norwegian, but they pulled out, didn't they?
Well, they did, and the company, has gone through its own financial challenges since. But what it proved was, A, there was demand, and it proved to the naysayers that the runway was too short to get from Cork to the east coast of the United States, which was proven not to be correct. Because technology, as I say, is our friend in this regard. Aircraft are now going farther on less fuel, and there are even further greener aircraft coming down the track in the years ahead.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're aware that Pat Dawson has said that they understand that the work is essential, but they should have been addressed way before now, particularly when you had an opportunity when so few people were using the airport at the height of the pandemic. They describe it as disappointing.
And I can appreciate where Pat is coming from. And, as I say, one of the challenges throughout this pandemic was, A, to get the funding in place, which only came through just prior to Christmas. And once the funding was in place, then, detailed design works have been completed at this stage, going through which has to be, given that, there's public monies involved here, we have to be due diligent. We have to follow EU procurement policies.
And who is doing the work, incidentally?
We don't know yet, Neil. Tenders will close this month, and we'll make an appointment of a contractor soon after that, and that announcement should be made known next month.
Okay, but you believe at some stage there will be transatlantic out of Cork, because our understanding was Norwegian said that it was low demand that forced them to cancel the Cork to Boston route in 2018. Low demand.
Well, one of the challenges with Norwegian was it was a new brand name, whereas if you were to get one of the household names that people would readily identify with operating that transatlantic corridor, we've proven you can stimulate demand on that route. We know people want to use it for both leisure and business. And hopefully when US visitors want to come back and can travel back safely across the Atlantic, we know we have a phenomenal tourist product here in Cork and the south of Ireland to offer. So it remains part of our ambition to get transatlantic back in and out of Cork. Okay.
And to those that are wondering about who the contractor is, you've answered that. You don't know yet because tenders haven't closed yet, and at that stage a decision will be made. Am I right?
Correct, and it'll be an internationally reputable company, people that have worked on similar projects like this. I mean, we've spoken to over 20 other European airports that have done this work over the last 2 or 3 years, and they all have advised us if they had the option to do it over a short, sharp 10-week period, as we're proposing, they would have done it, but obviously none of them had the benefit of the opportunity that's presented to us, unfortunately, due to the pandemic, but our traffic down 97%. So this is the best option, given that no option comes without risks or impact.
I know. It's just that I know it's not comparable. Well, it's somewhat comparable. Cork City Council decided to pedestrianise 17 city streets. They made an announcement on it a week ago, and we were talking about it here on the Friday. And the following Monday, there were diggers in our streets digging them up and resurfacing them. I mean, it was lightning fast.
And I can appreciate that, but what is of foremost priority here is that we can build a piece of infrastructure that's going to connect Cork and indeed the south of Ireland to the rest of the world for the next 20 years. A runway is a very complex piece of engineering. It's not just as simple as laying down a bit of tarmac at them. It's a very complex process. It involves a lot of safety considerations. As I say, we've spent months now designing the new runway as it will be. And once it's completed this November, it's going to serve this region and help us build up that network for the next 15 or 20 years. Okay,
Kevin, thank you for taking the call. Appreciate it as always. Kevin Cullinane, Marketing Manager at Cork Airport.
Neil Prendeville, the voice of Cork. Weekdays 9 to 12. Cork's Red FM. Red FM.